Picture this. You're 19 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. You're in college, you have dreams, and you're surrounded by a family that would move mountains for you. Now imagine that in one horrific moment, all of that is stolen away. This is Aniah Blanchard, a bright, loving college student whose stepfather happens to be UFC Heavyweight Walt Harris. But on October 23rd, 2019, Anaya wasn't just another missing person case. She became the victim of a crime so senseless, so preventable, that it would expose the dangerous cracks in our justice system. This grainy surveillance footage shows some of the last moments of Anaya's life. What happened next would shatter a family, galvanize a community, and ultimately change Alabama law forever. If someone you love disappeared tonight, how far would you go to find them? This is the story of Aniah Blanchard and the fight for justice that continues to this day. Before we dive into this heartbreaking case, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. Cases like these deserve to be remembered, and your support helps us tell these important stories. To understand the magnitude of what was lost, you first need to understand who Aniah Blanchard was. Born in 2000, Anaya was more than just statistics on a missing person report. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a young woman full of promise. When her mother Angela married UFC fighter Walt Harris, Anaya didn't just gain a stepfather, she gained a protector and best friend. Walt, known in the octagon as the Big Ticket, was a gentle giant outside the cage. The bond between him and Anaya was immediately apparent to anyone who met them. "She was my baby girl," Walt would later say. "It didn't matter that she wasn't biologically mine. From day one, she was my daughter in every way that mattered." Anaya was studying at Southern Union State Community College in Opelika, Alabama, working toward her dreams of helping others. Those who knew her described her as vibrant, caring, and someone who could light up any room she entered. She had a tight-knit group of friends, was active on social media like any teenager, and seemed to be navigating college life with the same mix of excitement and uncertainty that defines most 19-year-olds. But Anaya's life was about to intersect with someone who represented everything she was not. A repeat violent offender whose presence in society that night was the result of a system that had failed to protect its most vulnerable citizens. October 23rd, 2019, started like any other Wednesday for Anaya. She attended classes, hung out with friends, and made plans for what seemed like a typical college evening. At approximately 11:30 p.m., surveillance cameras captured Anaya at a Chevron gas station on South College Street in Auburn. She was alone, purchasing snacks, a completely normal, mundane activity that thousands of college students do every night. But if you look closely at this footage, you can see something that chills investigators to this day. In the background, barely visible, is a figure that would later be identified as Ibrahim Yazid, a man who should have been behind bars. What happened in the next few minutes remains partially unknown, but investigators believe Yazid approached Anaya either inside the store or immediately outside. Whether he attempted to rob her, kidnap her, or worse, we may never know the exact sequence of events. What we do know is that around 11:45 p.m., Anaya's phone sent its last signal before going dark. Her friends and family, used to constant communication with the social media-savvy teenager, wouldn't realize something was wrong for several more hours. The next morning, October 24th, Anaya's black Honda CR-V was found abandoned at an apartment complex in Montgomery, nearly 50 miles from where she was last seen. The driver's side door was damaged, and there were signs of a struggle. For Walt Harris, who was preparing for an upcoming UFC fight, the world was about to collapse in ways that no amount of physical training could prepare him for. When Anaya failed to return home or respond to calls and texts, her family knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. This wasn't like her. Anaya was responsible, communicative, and deeply connected to her family. Walt Harris, a man who had faced down some of the world's toughest fighters, found himself facing his greatest opponent yet, the unknown. In emotional interviews, he pleaded for his daughter's safe return. "I just want her to come home," Walt said, his voice breaking. "If you have her, please just let her go. She's got so much life to live." Within hours, Auburn became the center of a massive search effort. The local community rallied like few have seen before. Students from Auburn University, local residents, business owners, everyone joined the search for Anaya. The hashtag #FindAnaya began trending on social media. Her missing person photos were shared thousands of times across Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The UFC community, known for its tight-knit family atmosphere, amplified the search nationwide. Search parties combed through wooded areas. Volunteers distributed flyers, and local businesses offered rewards for information. The Lee County Sheriff's Office coordinated with state and federal agencies to expand the search. But as days turned into weeks, hope began to mix with a growing dread. Each passing day without contact increased the likelihood that this story wouldn't have a happy ending. The investigation, meanwhile, was starting to focus on a name that should have sent chills down the spine of anyone familiar with Alabama's criminal justice system: Ibrahim Yazid. To understand how Aniah Blanchard's murder was preventable, you need to understand who Ibrahim Yazid was and why he was walking free on October 23, 2019. Yazid wasn't a first-time offender who snapped in a moment of poor judgment. He was a repeat violent criminal with a rap sheet that read like a prosecutor's nightmare: kidnapping, robbery, attempted murder, sexual assault. In the months leading up to Anayah's murder, Yazid had been out on bond for multiple serious charges. This wasn't unusual for him. Alabama's bail system had repeatedly allowed him to walk free despite his escalating pattern of violence. Under Alabama law at the time, judges had broad discretion in setting bail, even for violent repeat offenders. The system was designed with the presumption of innocence in mind, but it failed to adequately weigh the danger that individuals like Yazid posed to the community. As investigators worked to piece together Anayah's disappearance, they began building a timeline of Yazid's movements on October 23rd. Surveillance footage, cell phone records, and witness statements began painting a picture of a predator who had been given far too many opportunities to harm innocent people. DNA evidence found in Anayah's abandoned vehicle would later conclusively link Yazid to the crime. But in those first crucial weeks, investigators had to methodically build their case, while Anayah's family lived in agonizing uncertainty. For Walt Harris, learning about Yazid's criminal history was devastating, in a way that went beyond the immediate grief. This wasn't a random tragedy, it was a preventable one. On November 25, 2019, just over a month after Anayah disappeared, hunters in Shorter, Alabama made a discovery that would end the search, but begin a new chapter of heartbreak for the Blanchard Harris family. Human remains found in a wooded area in Macon County were soon confirmed through DNA testing to be those of Aniah Blanchard. The 19-year-old college student with dreams of helping others had been found, but not in the way anyone had hoped. Walt Harris's statement following the discovery was heartbreaking in its raw honesty. "We found out today that our family has been broken, and we are going to need time to process and heal." The Auburn community, which had spent weeks searching and hoping, was devastated. Vigils were held, flowers were placed at makeshift memorials, and a collective grief settled over the area. The UFC family, which had rallied around Walt during the search, continued their support. Fellow fighters, UFC officials, and fans from around the world sent condolences and offered their support during this unimaginably difficult time. But even as the family began the process of saying goodbye to Anaya, law enforcement was building the case that would hopefully deliver justice. The evidence against Yazid was mounting, but the legal process was just beginning. If you're feeling the weight of this story, you're not alone. Cases like Aniah's remind us how precious and fragile life can be. Take a moment to let your loved ones know you're thinking of them. You never know when it might matter more than you realize. With Anayah's remains recovered, investigators could focus entirely on building an airtight case against Ibrahim Yazid. What they uncovered was a trail of evidence that painted a clear picture of premeditated violence. Surveillance footage from multiple locations traced Yazid's movements throughout the night of October 23rd. Cell phone data corroborated the timeline. Most damning of all, DNA evidence found in Aniah's vehicle directly linked Yazid to the crime. Investigators also uncovered evidence that Yazid had accomplices, individuals who helped him in the aftermath of the crime. These discoveries led to additional arrests and charges, expanding the scope of the case. As the case moved through the legal system, Yazid's extensive criminal history became a central focus. Prosecutors argued that his repeated violent behavior, combined with the justice system's repeated failure to keep him incarcerated, had directly led to Anayah's death. Meanwhile, Walt Harris and Aniah Blanchard began advocating for changes to Alabama's bail laws. They argued that violent repeat offenders like Yazid should not be eligible for bail, regardless of the presumption of innocence. Their advocacy efforts gained traction in the Alabama legislature, where lawmakers began crafting legislation that would become known as Anayah's Law, a constitutional amendment designed to keep violent repeat offenders behind bars while awaiting trial. The Auburn community and UFC fans nationwide supported these efforts, understanding that changing the law was the best way to ensure that Anayah's death would have lasting meaning and potentially prevent similar tragedies. In February 2023, nearly 3.5 years after Anayah's murder, Ibrahim Yazid finally faced trial for capital murder and kidnapping. The proceedings would bring both closure and continued pain for the Blanchard-Harris family. The trial laid bare the horrific details of Anayah's final hours. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence of Yazid's guilt, while also highlighting how his lengthy criminal history had been ignored by a system that prioritized procedure over public safety. Walt Harris's testimony was particularly powerful, as he described not just the loss of his daughter, but the systemic failures that made her death preventable. His words resonated far beyond the courtroom. When the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts, there was no celebration, only a quiet sense that justice had finally been served. Yazid was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would never again be able to harm innocent people. Perhaps more importantly for Anayah's legacy, Anayah's Law was overwhelmingly approved by Alabama voters in November 2022. The constitutional amendment allows judges to deny bail to defendants charged with Class A felonies if they pose a danger to the community. The law represents a fundamental shift in how Alabama approaches violent repeat offenders. It's a direct result of the Blanchard-Harris family's advocacy and their determination to ensure that Anayah's death would lead to meaningful change. Today, Walt Harris continues to honor Anayah's memory through advocacy work and by sharing their story. He's returned to fighting professionally, but his most important fight remains the ongoing effort to protect other families from similar tragedies. As we come to the end of Anayah's story, it's important to remember not just how she died, but how she lived. Aniah Blanchard was more than a victim. She was a young woman full of potential, love, and dreams. Auburn University established a scholarship in Anayah's name, ensuring that her memory will help other students achieve their educational dreams. The community that searched for her continues to honor her through various charitable efforts and safety initiatives. Anayah's case also highlights broader issues within our criminal justice system. The balance between individual rights and public safety continues to be debated, but her story provides a stark example of what can happen when that balance tips too far in the wrong direction. For Walt Harris and the Blanchard family, the healing process continues. They've channeled their grief into advocacy, ensuring that Anayah's death serves a greater purpose in protecting others. If you take anything from Anayah's story, let it be this: every life has value. Every person matters. And sometimes the most important battles are fought not in octagons or courtrooms, but in the everyday efforts to make our communities safer for everyone. As we remember Anayah, consider getting involved in your own community's safety initiatives. Support organizations that work to reform criminal justice, advocate for victims' rights, or simply look out for your neighbors. Sometimes the smallest actions can prevent the biggest tragedies. Aniah Blanchard should have graduated college, started a career, maybe gotten married and had children of her own. Instead, she became a symbol of both systemic failure and the power of love to create lasting change. Her stepfather Walt once said, "I want people to remember her smile, her laugh, her heart, but I also want them to remember that her death could have been prevented." If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel and share it with others. Cases like Aniah's deserve to be remembered, and your engagement helps ensure these important stories reach the people who need to hear them. Rest in peace, Aniah Blanchard. Your life mattered, your story matters, and your legacy will continue to protect others for years to come. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.